Welcome to the At a Total Loss podcast, where lost moms candidly talk about their experiences with stillbirth that have left them at a total loss for words. It is through our stories that we hope to give you support, motivation, friendship, and maybe a laugh or two. But most importantly, we hope to give you light in the darkest moments of your life. I'm Catherine, a lost mom to my beautiful son Brody, who was born still at 36 weeks on January 18th, 2022. While trying to survive the sadness and find answers as to why he died, I found this community of incredible women willing to share their journey, experiences, and sometimes margaritas so that I didn't feel alone. They helped me survive, and I hope we can do the same for you. So grab some wine and some tissues as we navigate this awful world of stillbirths that has left us all at a total loss. So, thanks so much for doing this. I know we've had 1,000 conversations, but I always like it when you get to talk about your son, who's also a Brody.
Yes, it's Brodies. So crazy.
It's wild.
I remember when I first heard about you and your Brody, I literally got chills because I was like, first of all, Brody, I feel like it's not very super popular name these days, but so when I heard that you lost a Brody, I was literally like, my hair stood up on my arms. I was like, that is I've got to talk to this girl.
I know.
Not just because of what you went through, but just I was like, this is crazy.
I felt the same way. We had picked the name kind of right, like a couple months before he was born. We knew, because we didn't know the sex. We were like, if it's going to be a boy, it's Brody. If it's going to be a girl, we have our girl's name.
So you didn't know the sex?
Really?
No,
I know, which I don't know how it would have turned out. Like, this is extremely traumatic, but I don't know what it'd have been like if I had pictured a boy for the whole time. Might have been a little bit more horrific.
Right.
Still horrific, but
yeah.
So I saw, after I'd given birth, we were in recovery, and it was like the last day we were there, and they gave us, Heartstrings gave us a little pamphlet, and inside was your story, and it said, and I was like, oh my God, this must be the Sarah that my friend Adrian had found when I first went into the hospital.
Yep.
And I was like, oh my God, this is her. Oh my God, she has a Brody. Oh my God. And I was like, no way. And I was like, I was all hopped up on whatever meds they gave me, but it was really crazy. It was trippy. But
it's wild.
I love it. So on that note, I would just want to hear his story again.
Yes. No, I love talking about Brody, his story, our story. So I'll just back up a little bit. So we do have a living daughter. So she is now almost 4. And she was born in July 2018, and her pregnancy was actually, it was pretty good. I did have placenta previa with her. Mm-hmm. So I had experienced a little bit of bleeding here and there throughout. In fact, I had a really bad bleeding with her at 18 weeks when I was for sure, I really thought I was having a miscarriage. I'd never seen that much blood before, all at one time. And so I remember going to the ER and you know, the heartbeat, and thank God she had a heartbeat. They determined I had placenta previa. And so they were like, you might have some, that's just when the placenta is just very low lying. Mm-hmm. So it sometimes rubs up against your cervix and can just cause some irritation, bleeding. So they were like, you might have some, bleeding throughout your pregnancy. But because because I had that, they let me have a scheduled C-section at 37 weeks because they don't want you to go into labor when you have that, because it can be dangerous.
Okay.
So this is just all important to the story for, we'll get into that. But anyway, so we had a scheduled C-section with her at 37 weeks. And she was great. She was healthy. And I remember thinking in the hospital, like, I'm definitely not going to be pregnant for at least another year. I was ready to just have not that I didn't love pregnancy, but you just wanted a little break. So I remember thinking, like, at least a year, we're good. So because I've got a blood clotting disorder, I can't be on hormonal or estrogen-based birth control. So because we knew that we would probably have another baby, like we would probably try in like a year and a half, we were like, there's no point me getting an IUD or anything. So we'll just be careful.
Right.
Famous last words.
Doing the air quotes on the be careful.
Yeah, we'll just be careful. So when Ansley was 6 months old, we conceived Brody. Mm-hmm. It was our one. And I still, it was one of the biggest shocks of my life. Not anymore, but it was, at the time, it was the biggest shock of my life. I was instantly upset. Not that I wasn't grateful to be pregnant, but that's just not what I had planned. I'm a planner, and that's not what I had planned. I did not plan to have children so close together. I mean, they were going to be 15 months apart. I felt like I was robbing Ansley of her childhood, of her being the only child and taking trips, just the three of us. And this was now going to be my second summer that I was going to have to be pregnant in a row, and I couldn't be on the beach drinking margaritas. First world problems in the grand scheme of things. But
honestly, we all have thoughts like that. And when after you lose, you're like, damn it, I was so dumb.
I know.
Yeah.
So looking back, I'm like, really? Like, those were your concerns? Really? So anyway, we started obviously getting used to the idea. I found some people on Instagram that had kids close together, and so I started getting excited that, that's going to be really cute. They're going to grow up really close together, and I was kind of hoping for a girl because I was like, that'd be really cute if they've, sisters, and I can just reuse all of Ansley's clothes, and I was like, this will be perfect. So we found out that Brody was a boy, and I won't lie, I was a little disappointed at first. I just never saw myself as a boy mom. I'm just uber girly, and so I was just like, I need another girl. I've already got one girl, but one's not enough. I need another. So I was a little disappointed, but quickly started getting excited for it. And my husband was really excited, which is what made me get more excited. Because when you see your husband excited, he really wanted a boy. So that was really exciting. And my pregnancy with him, for the most part, was really great. The only weird part is at 22 weeks pregnant, I actually got appendicitis. We were actually on our baby moon down in Amelia Island, and I woke up one morning in the middle of the night, actually, in like severe pain, and I had no idea what was. I didn't know if it was baby related. I didn't know what was going on, but I was just like in severe pain.
Oof,
so we had to drive to some tiny little hospital on Amelia Island. Okay, run a bunch of tests. Needless to say, our baby moon was ruined because I ended up spending like 2-3 nights in the hospital. Had to have emergency appendicitis surgery while I was pregnant. Yeah. I don't think I've ever told you this before. Yeah, I don't think I ever told you this before.
My face, you guys. It's like, what?
Yeah, I've got, so while I was pregnant, and of course they have to give you all the not bad news, what's the word I'm trying to say? They've got to give you all the disclaimers, anesthesia while you're pregnant, could be risky for the pregnancy, blah, blah, blah. And because you're not 24 weeks yet, we're not going to really do anything to save your baby because you're not viable. So like all this talk is going on. And I'm just like, okay, well, you're really giving me no choice, because if I don't have this, then it could rupture, and I'm having an infection, and then I could infect him. So I have no choice. So I don't know why we're even talking about the risks, because there's no choice.
Let's go. Cut me up.
So luckily he was fine. We got through that. So, I'm thinking like, wow, this has been a crazy pregnancy so far. Little did I know. So his pregnancy was great. So because of that, I didn't have to, delivered Ansley at 37 weeks because of the Previa. Didn't have Previa with Brody. So the plan was that I was going to have another scheduled C-section at 39 weeks. So I had to do another C-section because my previous one had been less than 18 months prior. So I was not a candidate at all for VBAC, which was really fine with me. I love C-sections. I can schedule it. It's planned. It's right in my wheelhouse. It's perfect.
Oh my God, it's going on. Yeah. If I ever make merchandise, it's going on it.
I love
C-sections. Weirdo.
Proud C-section mama here. I've had 3 of them in less than 3 years. So no shame. But anyway, so the plan was to deliver him at 39 weeks via C-section. And everything was looking great. I was already high risk because I have the blood clotting disorder. So, I was getting ultrasounds. I think I was getting an ultrasound and an NST. I would do the BBP ultrasound, and then I would have an NST. So that was basically 2 times a week I was getting monitored. And I truly didn't think there was any way anything could go wrong. Like, I knew about stillbirths. I had, heard like those, at the time, what felt like one-off stories. But in my mind, I was like, okay, well, that's because they weren't being monitored, or they missed something.
Yeah.
Something, they
super obvious.
Right. I just assumed if I'm getting an ultrasound every week, and not just a regular ultrasound, these BPP ultrasounds, biophysical ultrasounds, are supposed to be checking for things that it's like, okay, if the baby passes this test.
So you were doing those with Brody?
Yes.
Starting at how many weeks?
32.
What?
Yes.
I don't think I realized that.
Yes. So at 30, so that was just the standard protocol for a high risk patient. And I was only high risk because of the blood clotting disorder and being on blood thinners.
Right.
And so just their standard protocol with that was a BPP ultrasound and an NST 2 times a week. So I did like the an ST on Monday, and then I would do the ultrasound on Thursday. And again, this isn't a regular ultrasound. It's to check like certain things, and the baby has to pass these certain things to kind of clear you. And I forget what the actual statistics are, so I'm not going to pretend to quote something scientific here, but I want to say someone told me that like if your baby passes that, like the chances of them dying within the next week are like very, very slim, because it's like that's basically checking on the well-being of the baby. It checks for their breathing, their movement, all these things. So I was getting that done. So I truly thought like there's no way anything can happen because I'm being monitored so closely. Like they're going to find something if something's wrong.
Yeah, it's literally their job.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. You are only here to check my baby. So I wasn't even really doing kick counts. I mean, every once in a while I would pay attention to like, obviously I would pay attention to his movements, but at the time I also had, Ansley at this point was 13, 14 months old. So she was keeping us very busy. So I just wasn't as in tune to my pregnancy maybe as I would have wanted to be. And again, I was getting all those tests. So I assumed that was my like feel safe, right? Like I was getting all these ultrasounds. I had all these appointments. There's no way something can go wrong. So let's see, October 10th, I went in for my biophysical that day. My ultrasound or my C-section was a week. In a week, it was going to be the next Friday. So we were 8 days away. Everything looked great on the ultrasound. And I remember that day. I remember that ultrasound very well. I remember Miles and I think we had taken 2 separate cars. We'd either taken 2 separate cars or he dropped me off and then was parking and came in. But because we went to the same OB, and you always had to wait.
Yeah.
For sometimes an ungodly amount of time. And it was like, I don't understand. I have an appointment. But whatever. I digress. So I assumed that, it's okay, babe. I'm probably going to have to wait a minute. So it'll be fine. Well, I think that particular day I didn't have to wait as long as I had planned to wait. So they actually took me back there before Miles had gotten there. And I remember thinking like, oh, I really want him to like be here for it. And for no really particular reason, because again, I'd been having so many of these. So it's not like he hadn't had another chance to see the baby. But for whatever reason, I wanted him to be there for that one. And like looking back on it now, I'm like, probably because that was the last time we were going to see Brody, and I'm actually just having that revelation like right now as I'm saying this, because I hadn't really reflected on that until now.
Wow.
So there must have just been a reason that I felt so strongly that like I want him to be in here. And so the ultrasound tech actually finished what she needed to do before my husband got in there, but he made it in there, and she was like, oh, well, I'll scan you for just a minute longer so he can see too, which she didn't have to do looking back. I mean, she could have just been like, we're done, move on. Like, sorry, your husband wasn't here. So we got to see the baby. Everything looked great. The doctor we met with that day was actually the doctor that did Ansley's C-section. So we talked about how she did Ansley's C-section and showed her pictures on my phone of that. And everything was great. And she was like, all right, your C-section is going to be, next Friday, yada, yada, yada. Awesome. So the next night, Friday night, sorry, this is a very lengthy story, but it's just
no, this is what we're here for.
It's all the details. So the next night, we took Ansley out to our favorite little pizza place, and we took her to ice cream. And I remember thinking, I even posted like on my Instagram story, like, last Friday night is a family of 3, and I mean, everybody knew when we were gonna have the baby. Because it was scheduled, so I had been very clear, that was gonna October 18th. That's when Brody's gonna be here. And everything was fine. I mean, literally, movement felt good. Nothing felt odd. I wasn't in any pain. I remember that night we put Ainsley to bed and I was organizing. I was determined to be more organized with bottles and pump parts this time. So I remember I had gotten this little Lazy Susan thing from Amazon and I'd organized it. And I was so proud of myself for having it all organized. And I was like spinning it and being all excited about my organization. And then I remember as I went to bed that night, I remember feeling him. And I remember that being a really good night of sleep. Like normally, as you know, when you're pregnant, you wake up a billion times to pee. And I really want to say, I literally don't think I woke up once.
Wow.
And looking back on that, I don't know if that was like subconsciously, I don't know. But I'm like, was something happening that maybe God was like trying to let me be rested for this? Or maybe if I had woken up sooner to pee, the ball would have gotten rolling sooner. And so maybe, and then it would have been the middle of the night. So then like, what would we have done with our daughter? So part of me is like, I almost wonder if like I didn't wake up to pee that night because maybe God was somehow protecting me and letting this happen in the morning as opposed to in the middle of the night when it maybe would have just been a little more traumatic than it already was.
Right.
So I remember waking up to go pee. It was like 7:15 in the morning. I woke up to pee, got back in bed, and I'm like laying there, and I feel this pop. And I'm like, that's weird. I wonder if my water just broke. Because my water didn't break with Ansley because it was a scheduled C-section.
Right.
So I didn't know what it felt like, but I imagined this is what it would feel like because it felt like a little pop and like a gush. I was like, oh, shoot, whenever my water just broke. So I like looked down, though, and it wasn't water. It was blood. And, it was so, I look back, it was really, if you know me in real life, I am a very panicky person. Okay. I do not do good in emergencies. Like, not at all. Like, there was this one time that our kitchen caught on fire when I was in high school. My mom had all these decorative things on our stovetop. Bad idea. Very bad idea.
Clearly.
Yeah, bad. It was like it was just a decorative thing, okay? And it was one of those, electric stoves. So she turned on the wrong eye.
Oh my God.
So the decoration went up in flames. And she's telling me, it's Halloween, by the way, so it was real spooky at our house that night. And I immediately start panicking. And my mom is like, go call 911, go, tell me. And I just start running around like chicken with my head cut off. I mean, I'm just like not any help at all. Like my sister, who's like 5 years younger than me, had to like slap me and be like, get it together. So I'm just saying all this to say I am not good when it comes to emergency situations.
You painted a pretty good picture.
Yeah. Okay. I freeze up. I stall. Not good. For whatever reason, I was like oddly calm.
Yeah.
And I know we've talked about this a little bit before, but it was weird. It was almost just like this like peace kind of came over me of like, I gotta
Did you
this.
have like a solid feeling?
Not right away.
Yeah.
Because I had bleeding with Ansley and everything had turned out okay with her. I think maybe at the time I thought, well, maybe this is normal when your water breaks.
Yeah.
Maybe you bleed a little bit, or maybe the placenta has moved, or maybe I at the time I don't think I'd gone to like the worst case scenario quite yet. But I do remember the panic did start to kind of rise as the morning escalated. So I tell my husband, I think I'm bleeding. I think we need to go to the hospital like now. He's like, oh, okay. So he gets up and starts brushing his teeth. He's very into brushing his teeth, by the way. Okay. So, you marry opposites. I am not into brushing my teeth. He's very into brushing his teeth. So anyway.
Oh, dudes.
And so I'm like, babe, there's no time for brushing our teeth. Like, we just need to go. Like, we need to go. Like, I don't know what's wrong, but I also feel like this isn't 100% right. So let's just go. So I call my dad, tell my dad to come over to watch Ansley because she's still sleeping. And I will say I did start kind of panicking. I remember getting out of bed and feeling kind of another gush. And that's when I kind of started freaking out a little bit.
Okay.
So I was like, you know what? I'm just going to lay on the floor. Because at the time I was like, okay, let me put pants on. We'll get in the car and drive ourselves. But then when I stood up out of bed and kind of felt more bleeding, I was like, you know what? No. That's when I started, I think, getting a little more freaked out. I was like, I'm just going to lay here. And I was like, maybe we just need to call an ambulance because I don't know if I can walk and I don't know now what's wrong. I was still kind of calm, but starting to get a little more panicky.
Yeah.
But it was weird. I was kind of panicky for me. Not that I wasn't worried about Brody, but I was also worried for me. And maybe that's because I have Ansley. I had a living child at the time, so maybe I was panicky about leaving her. So I remember my dad coming over. I remember him hugging me. He leaned down on the floor and like gave me a kiss. And I could tell when your dad starts crying, then you kind of start crying.
Oh my God, yeah.
And I remember my dad kind of looking like a little bit afraid, which I think kind of made me a little bit more afraid. And I remember, so whenever you call an ambulance, the fire trucks come too.
Yes.
Surprising. I didn't know. News to
Maybe
me.
they heard your reputation.
I guess. With the fire. Oh my God. This girl might need help with a fire too. So we'll just send all the resources. So the fire truck actually got there before the ambulance. So these two firemen walk into our bedroom. Mind you, I don't have panties or pants on.
Jesus, I did not know this part of the
big
story.
oversized t-shirt.
I cannot. Oh my God.
Laying on the floor, bleeding. Not like a lot, but it was, yeah. And so the firemen are like standing over me. And I'm just like, this is just like I had a kind of chuckle. I mean, I didn't outwardly chuckle, but in my mind I was like, this is just a little comical. Just a little bit. If I can find any humor in this, it's this right now. And I remember this one firefighter was asking me about the bleeding. It was like, well, just put pressure. And I'm like, dude, that's not how this works. That's not how the bleeding works down there. Just
I have to go.
Just letting you know. This is not like a wound. Yes. I remember him saying
Thanks,
that.
sir. Let me just grab my crotch.
He was
that's
like,
better.
Well, and I already had like a towel down there, but he was just like, just, put pressure. And I'm like, dude, I don't think that's not the kind of bleeding that's happening here. But it was fun. It was fun. He provided me some humor from that day, so I will thank him for
bless
that.
him.
I know. But
He probably went home and Googled and was like shocked.
I know. He probably went home and like told his like wife or girlfriend or whoever, and they were probably like, that was the stupidest thing to say. Like the stupidest. But
oh my God, I wish we could find him.
I know. If you're out there, thank you for providing me the comedic relief that morning. So the ambulance finally shows up. They stretcher me out of the house. I get into the ambulance. Mind you, I had also ridden an ambulance a few months prior when I had my appendicitis, and they had to transfer me from the small Amelia Island Hospital to the bigger Jacksonville Hospital. And I remember making a joke like, oh, hopefully first and last time in an ambulance. Joke's on me. That was not my first and last time in an ambulance. I mean, really, I go my whole life without riding in an ambulance, and then I ride in two within 3-4 months. Yes. So checked that off the bucket list twice. Not that anyone needs to try to check that off a bucket list. Don't recommend.
On your bucket list. I have questions.
Don't recommend. 0 to 10, recommend that. So I get into the ambulance. They don't let Miles ride in the back with me. He had to ride in the front. And I remember him giving me this kind of like little bit of a scared look. Which I was like, okay, I don't need you to be scared because like I'm already scared. Because at that point, I think the realization was sitting in that during all of this span of time, let's say it was maybe 30 minutes, I hadn't felt Brody move. And I felt like my stomach was like in a ball. Like it felt like very tight. Not like uncomfortable tight, but just like it just felt very stiff, like a ball. Is the only way I can kind of describe it.
Oh my God.
So so we get to the hospital. Again, oddly still a little calm, but freaking out a little bit. They wheel us right. Everything happened very fast after that. Like by the time we like got to the hospital, it literally feels like it was like a time, like you were like sucked through a time warp, and you were just like, like it just everything just started happening really quick. So we get there, they immediately try to start hooking me up to find his heartbeat, and they use one of those things that they use for the NST. So I remember me and the nurse kind of looking at each other, and she's like looking, and I remember just saying like, please no, like don't please.
Say it.
Yeah.
Don't say it. Yeah.
And she's looking at me, and she's kind of looking kind of scared. She's like, well, let's just get an ultrasound. And everyone at this point is like very panicky. Like at this point, there are now like what felt like 10 people in the room, and maybe it wasn't, but it felt like that. Because people are now panicking because like I'm bleeding, or can't find a heartbeat on the NST. So then they're wheeling in the ultrasound, but I guess they can't do. I guess like either a midwife or a doctor has to do an ultrasound or has to like confirm or something. So they're having a midwife like ran in, and they're pulling up the ultrasound, and like again can't find the heartbeat. And I remember her just looking at me, and she kind of had tears in her eyes. She was like, I'm sorry. She's like, there's no heartbeat. But then it all just happened so fast. It literally all happened so fast after that. Like I remember kind of like being like, oh my God, like this is not happening. And I remember my husband, I mean, he's trying to like be strong for me, and he's like in disbelief, and he's like, it's gonna be okay, because he's just trying to calm me down. Meanwhile, I'm still bleeding, and they're freaking out that I'm bleeding. So they're just like, we need to do a C-section like ASAP. They were like, so then it was like something out of like Grey's Anatomy.
Right.
It was like everything started moving very fast.
And
they were
meanwhile, are you in a sense of like weird calm? Are you having an out of body? Are you in shock?
I feel like I'm having an out of body experience.
Yeah.
Like I'm like this.
It's not happening.
This is not happening. Like this is not happening. Like we just saw him less than 48 hours ago on an ultrasound, and he was fine. Like this is how is this happening right now? Like,
Yeah.
What are the next steps here? Like it was crazy. I feel like it was a blessing. I know a lot of people, and I would probably think the majority that have a stillbirth don't get to have the delivery that I had, which was I was just completely sedated. I mean, I was put under complete anesthesia and had a C-section. So it's like I almost just got to block everything out, which I don't know is good or bad. I mean, I don't know. I mean, maybe would it have been better if I'd had more time to process things before he was born. I don't know. But everything moved very fast after that. I mean, literally, I think between the time they told me he didn't have a heartbeat to the time I was fully put under was maybe like 60 seconds. I mean, it all happened quick. They were, I remember them yelling for the doctor. They were like, we need her down here like ASAP for an emergency C-section. They wheeled me back into the OR, and I remember them, they had to obviously put me fully asleep. So they were putting the gas mask over my face. And I remember someone holding my hand, and I just remember saying, like, why is this happening to me?
Yeah.
And she was like, I need you to just, and everyone was like crying. Like, everyone was like crying. And I remember her just saying, like, I need you to breathe, because they were trying to get me to calm down so that they could put me to sleep. And so I remember that being one of the last things I said when they put me to sleep. And then I was asleep, which was, I guess, kind of nice. And so I remember waking up in recovery, and I was very groggy. It was very groggy, but I remembered what happened. I was very groggy, and I asked where the baby was, and I remember when I came to, Miles was like, God bless him, he was like hovering over me. I mean,
God
it was
bless
really
our
sweet.
husbands, yeah.
I know. It was very like my parents. So at this point, so I guess I'll tell kind of what was happening while I was under, that I found out after the fact. So Miles said, again, it was like a scene from a movie. They like wheel me away, and then he's just left literally crying. And he's like, what do I fucking do now? Like,
Yeah.
Well, and he too didn't know what was wrong with me.
Mm-hmm.
So he's freaking out because he's like, well, is she okay? Like, what's,
Am I gonna lose my wife too?
right? Like what is happening with her? So poor thing, he was alone. So so at this point, my dad was over there with Ansley. My mom had come over to join him. They came separately just because my dad went first, and then my mom came over. And Miles said, I think he called them first, or no, he texted them and said, I forget exactly what he said, but I think he just said something to the effect like, we lost the baby, or the baby's gone, or something. And my mom said she just went into the bathroom, just like screamed, because it was just. And at that point, I mean, obviously she was sad about losing her grandson, but she just knew the pain that I was going to experience.
Mm-hmm.
So, Miles said all the nurses were very nice to him. They were trying to pat his back, and they were, sitting him down in a special chair, and they were like trying to comfort him, and, who can we call for you? Who can we? So he just kind of started making some phone calls to like his family, my family, some of my very close friends, that he thought would want to know right away. So by the time I got to the hospital, or by the time I got out of the C-section, my parents were both there now.
Okay.
They had found
Amazing.
someone else to come watch Ansley so that they could come be with me. Because thankfully this was pre-COVID, so everyone could still, this was October 2019, so everyone could still be in the hospital, which was great. So they have us in recovery, and my mom was holding the baby, and Miles was hovering over me. And I remember the first question I asked when I came to, which I laugh about it, but at the same time, I'm like, I feel like that's an important question, was, do I still have my uterus?
Yeah.
Because I was like, again, when I went under, I didn't know what was happening. I didn't know what was wrong. I didn't know why I was bleeding.
What they were gonna find
what
when
they
they
were
got
gonna
in
find,
there. Yeah.
right? What were they going to have to do? I just didn't know. So one of the first questions I asked the doctor was, or even I don't even think I waited for the doctor. I think I asked Miles. I was like, do I still have my uterus? And he was like, yes, you do. Because the only thing I could think about in that moment was getting pregnant again. Which sounds crazy, especially.
No. That's consensus. Everybody says it.
Especially because A, what you've just been through, but B, especially for me, because I had now just had 2 back-to-back pregnancies.
Yeah.
So you would think I would really want to break, but I was just like, I was just all consumed with, and not that I wasn't grieving Brody, but it's just like, the whole thing is just unnatural. And so my instinct in that moment, I think, was to just, when can I have another baby? When can I be pregnant again? Because this is not right. We need to make it right. So, and then I again, Miles is still hovering over me, and I remember him asking if I wanted to hold the baby. And at first I said no. And I think it was because I was still just groggy and out of it. And honestly, I was just scared. I didn't know what to expect. You know, I mean, you just don't know when you're put in that situation.
And there's literally no one there saying like, okay, here's what's happening.
Right.
This is what we highly recommend.
Right.
They're not doing that.
No. I mean, nobody.
They're shell shocked. They are.
Yeah. Even the nurses, and don't get me wrong, the nurses were angels. I mean, the ones that were there with me were so kind. I mean, but nobody just knows what to do or say. They just
Mhm.
don't. They just
Mhm.
and they don't know how to tell you nobody knows. And so I forget if I finally said yes or Miles said that I should, or I don't know, but I remember him handing me Brody, and I just remember he was so cute.
Yeah.
Like, he was so cute, and I remember just thinking, like, you are so freaking cute. And I don't know what I was expecting. Not that I was expecting like little gremlin or something, but I
Well,
just
yeah,
remember,
yeah,
I just
yeah.
remember him looking just like so beautiful, like
Mhm.
so beautiful, like so pretty, and I was just, and it was like this weird feeling of like you're happy because you're holding your baby,
Mhm.
but you're sad because he's dead, and you're like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
So that was rough. And the whole hospital stay, it was, gosh, there's so many things. I feel like I'm lucky in that I got to do a lot of things that maybe others didn't. But then I also feel like I've learned a lot now, 2.5 years later, that I wish I had done.
Yeah.
Like, I never took his diaper off. And I know that sounds weird.
Yeah, no, this is another layer that I'm happy you're touching on, because when it first happened to me, I think you and another woman were saying, take the pictures. Someone was like, do the baptism,
Yes,
swaddle
yes.
them, and hold them. But there's another level. Some women I've heard bathe them and then actually
Yes.
swaddle them themselves
Yes.
or change the diaper. And I was like, I didn't even think to do that. I couldn't even breathe, let alone do that. So
Yeah.
you think that you would have done that if you
I
could go
wish I
back?
had. Yeah, I wish I
Yeah.
had bathed him. I wish I had, changed his diaper, just to the act of changing it. I wish I don't have, one of the things I really regret is I don't have a picture of I have a picture of Miles holding him, but it's not like a great picture. It was just like one I snapped on my phone real quick.
Yeah.
But I wish I had, because we did have someone, like a professional, one of the hospital photographers, come in and take pictures. And I just wasn't obviously in the right state of mind to direct them, to tell them what kind of pictures I wanted. And they still did a great job. And again, I know I'm at least one of the lucky ones that have any pictures at all, nonetheless professional. But I don't have like a professional one of my husband like holding him. I don't have one of my mom. I don't have one at all of my mom holding him. And I wish I did.
Yeah.
So there's definitely, and I wish I had bathed him. I wish I had, there's tons of things I wish I had done. Part of me, we debated this when we were in the hospital. Should we have had Ansley come? I don't know.
I don't know
I mean,
the answer to that one.
That one, the problem is she was just so young.
Yeah, that might have been.
And she already didn't like seeing me in the hospital bed in general. Like, even after we Brody, even after we had like kind of sent Brody away and she came to visit like another day while I was in the hospital still, she was very weirded out that I was in the hospital bed. So I don't know how that would have all been.
Yeah.
But I'll never have a picture of them together. So I just always wonder. But we chose not to. Ultimately, obviously, we chose not to have her come again, just because I think she was just too young, and I just didn't want to traumatize her.
Look, you did the literal best you could, and it's not like you had tons of time to think about it.
No,
it's like, what do you want right now? You know,
and that's what I'm saying with the C-section thing. I think it was a blessing and a curse that I got to have a quick delivery.
Yeah,
because I was able to just be put under and just not have to. I totally know it's a different experience when you're having to labor and deliver, and I that's totally different.
Yeah.
But I also think maybe you get more time to maybe think about what you want to do or what you want to, or maybe you have more time to plan and text people or call people.
You're right. Yeah, probably.
Whereas I didn't have any. I mean, it was like it happened. It really happened very quick. So I think it's a blessing and a curse the way that it happened for me. But yeah, so I do regret not keeping him longer. Each day they could have brought him back to us.
Did you have the little cryo crib? Did you have the cuddle?
I didn't.
You didn't.
I didn't even know.
Where the hell was it?
I didn't even know that existed.
I know.
And again, that is why it would be nice to have some sort of ambassador.
Mm-hmm.
I like that name too, ambassador. Lost mom ambassador, or stillbirth mom. I don't know what we want to call ourselves, but that's where one of us would come in handy, because I literally didn't even know that was a thing, let alone that our hospital had one.
For those listening or you listening, if you don't know what it is, it looks like a little cradle. It looks like a hospital little bed for the baby that you would typically have, but it is cold and it will preserve the baby, and it's not as cold as the morgue. So it would preserve the baby in the room with you for up to 5 days, I believe. So he can stay in the room with you and doesn't have to leave. Otherwise, they have to take I can't even believe I'm saying this like so normally. Like this is the most fucked up thing I've ever said. But they have to, because for my situation, I went into DIC after I had to go into emergency surgery. So I lost 4 days with him pretty much. And by the time I got him, it's not the same baby. He'd been in the morgue. So this allows the mother to have the baby in the room with them for a long time. And they're very expensive. I think they're upwards of $4,000 to $5,000. I know Northside had one, and now someone I heard just donated 3 more.
Oh, that's great.
Which now they have 4. And I think your response is probably like, damn, there's that many? Well, yes. Because Northside is number 2 in the country for baby deliveries, and I believe I've heard they have 5 a month.
Stillbirths?
Yeah.
I mean, I believe it.
There was one on my floor when I was there at the same time.
Do the math. I mean, stillbirth is 1 in 160. And then I don't know what the numbers are with Northside delivering babies, but if I had a calculator right here, I would whip out my 10 key and do some
Seriously,
number crunching.
We should actually. Yeah, I need to know. I called Northside and I spoke to Heartstrings. I did not know they were all nurses in Northside in Atlanta, if you don't live in Atlanta. And they're all nurses because I was like, I want a part of the team. And they're like, you got to be a nurse. I'm like, all right, I'm coming up with a task force to make sure that we can help some people because there's really not a lot of info.
No, there's got to be, and I get that they've got to be nurses, but I mean, I think there also needs to be people like us that are just ambassadors that can give this real-time information of here's what you need to do and things that you need to, just memories you want to make, pictures you need to take.
And I'm so thankful you had a good staff, a kind staff. I've heard some absolute horror stories where they were just very much like very almost heartless. Yeah. And it's even more traumatizing when you want the people in the room to understand the magnitude of what's going on, and they're just like, oh, it's no big deal. It'll be all right. Bye.
And and I don't know if I just tell myself this to make myself feel better or if it's the truth, but I'd like to tell myself that these people are just very uncomfortable by what has happened, that they truly don't know, like they're so uncomfortable by it, like that their coping mechanism is to just have no heart about it. I don't know.
I agree with you, but I feel like at this point, if we're going to continue to have an uptick, quotes, I'm doing quotes again, because if I hear that again, an uptick in stillbirths, train the staff to handle it.
Absolutely.
It should be just as important as if it was a living baby. And I say that only because not only are you there alone and not knowing what to do, you put your trust in these people all the way to this point, and then they just leave you hanging, and you're like, why are you leaving me? Why are you abandoning me in this moment here? And I get it. I mean, it's got to be so damn awkward. They don't know what to say or do. But I think and I'm hoping this bill passes. Is the Shine for Autumn, is that it?
Yes.
I think it's going to do some more education. And I can put a link in the captions of this underneath to see if you want to check it out. But it's going to help educate caregivers, medical professionals on what to do. And let me ask you this on that note, though. Would you have wanted... So when you get pregnant, and obviously if you're listening to this, you probably have been, but you are kind of, it's very casual. It's very at like 30, I remember 30 weeks, like, congrats, you made it. I'm like, made it? What are you talking about?
Yes.
Would you have wanted someone to sit down at like the 6 to 8 week when they do the viability test and be like, so it's very rare, but a potential outcome could be a stillbirth. And this is what the causes of stillbirth are. Number 1, small placenta. Number 2, clot. Number 3, unknown. Number 4, hypertension, whatever it is. Would you have wanted them to say that to you super early in your pregnancy?
So if you had asked me this before I had a stillbirth, I probably would have said no, because I would have been like, well, I don't want to be scared. Yeah. But now that I've had a stillbirth, obviously, yes, we need to educate people on this so that they're not completely shocked like we were.
Came out of nowhere.
And I get the whole, we don't want to scare people. I do. But sometimes people
pregnancy is scary anyway.
Sometimes we need to scare people because that's how people
It's true.
That's how there's action is taken, out of fear, right? If you're not afraid, then what are you going to do to prevent it? We're afraid of car accidents, so we wear a seatbelt.
Yeah.
You're afraid of of guns, so you lock up your guns in a safe. You know what I mean? It's like we take safety measures because we're afraid of something happening.
Yeah.
So I think maybe we need to be more afraid of these things happening so that more safety measures are taken.
Right. So, let's go back. What did you ever find out specifically what happened?
There was a lot of speculation. No definitive answers. They speculated a placental abruption, which is when the placenta detaches from your uterus. And because the placenta is the baby's lifeline, if it's not attached to you anymore, then the baby's not getting oxygen. I'm not convinced that that's what happened, and neither are a lot of the doctors I saw, because the way I presented, yes, I was bleeding, which is usually a sign of a placental abruption, but I was never like going into shock. My blood pressure was fine the whole time. I didn't. I mean, when you have a full placental abruption like that, where the baby passes that quickly, I would have been losing a lot of blood and probably like passed out, and that wasn't happening. So we kind of don't think it was that. I think deep down it has something to do with my blood clotting disorder. So I almost think that I wasn't either on a high enough dose of blood thinners or just because over time, maybe it was just too late kind of thing. Like maybe I went too far in my pregnancy is what I'm trying to say. Because we tested the placenta, that came back normal. But when I was pregnant with my rainbow baby, which we can talk about that a little bit later, I had my doctor pull the surgery notes. So you can have if you have a C-section, you can have your there's always surgery notes about what they find when they kind of open you up. And so I had her pull the surgery notes because I was like, okay, we know what the placenta said, but was there something maybe on the inside that obviously we couldn't send off to test because it's inside, that maybe could give us an answer. And so she looked at the surgery notes and they noted that they had found clots on my uterus where the placenta was. So I'm wondering if maybe I just wasn't on enough blood thinners to prevent a blood clot from forming. And then maybe the blood clot, because what can happen is the blood clot can form behind the uterus and then cause a portion of the placenta to detach.
And none of this could have been seen on any of your testing leading up to it.
That's a good question. I feel like you would have had to know what to look for. Because I don't think blood clots form that quick. Like I said, we had an ultrasound Thursday morning. Brody passed Saturday morning, if not before that. And I would think a blood clot would have shown up. So it just maybe wasn't something they were looking for. I mean, something, again, I was on blood thinners, so I thought I was protected from getting blood clots at all. But now that I look back on it, maybe I wasn't on a strong enough.
Was it a different dose than you had with
Ansley? So Ansley was delivered a week earlier.
Okay.
And I know maybe I'm just, when you go through things like this, you grasp it. You grasp at things to have an answer. And when you don't have an answer, you grasp at things for answers. So I have made up in my own head, whether that's crazy or not, that it's because I went a week longer with him. And maybe that's totally fabricated, but Ansley was delivered at 37 weeks, and I just can't help but think if we had delivered Brody at 37 weeks, he would still
Would they have
be
let
here.
you?
No.
I don't think so.
Nope.
Yeah.
You have to have, I had to fight tooth and nail to even get our third child, our second son, my rainbow baby, at 37 weeks. And that was even a fight. And with that's with a prior stillbirth. So no, They would not, unless something was wrong, they weren't going to let me deliver Brody any earlier than 30. 39 is the earliest they will deliver, induce you or schedule a C-section if everything is perfect.
How did you get them to sign off for Tate?
Just a lot of begging and pleading and saying I am not going to go any further than 37 weeks because I mentally and emotionally can not handle this anymore. And there's a lot of research about it too. I studied like the American Academy of OBGYNs or whatever it's called.
Yeah.
I don't know
that's right. Yeah,
don't quote me on it, but I want to say they even recommend now that if you have a history of an unexplained stillbirth, that the recommendation is 37-week delivery.
Oh, I'm going to need a link to that.
I think I'm almost positive it says that if there's because especially if it's unexplained, because then it's well, then what happened? You know, it's one thing when, not that it makes the loss any easier, and not that you still shouldn't advocate for yourself to have delivered as soon as they let you, but when you have something like a cord, okay, so we know it was the cord, or we know it was hypertension or whatever it is, you know, okay, we can mitigate that next time or look for it next time. But when it's totally, you have no idea what happened, then it like opens a whole can of worms for,
and it goes to question
it could happen again,
if
right?
they're safer outside of you than inside of you.
Well, and that's my thing. I've had 2 37-week babies that are alive, and I have one 38-week baby who's not. So
evidence is there. Yeah.
And both my 37-week babies, neither of them needed NICU time. They were tiny, but they were perfectly healthy. Perfectly healthy.
Did you go in before the 37 weeks? Did you go in at like 36 and lay there and say I'm staying?
I went in at kind of, yeah. I went in at 36 weeks. Actually, no, I went in exactly at 37 weeks because I was 37 weeks on a weekend. You can't schedule a C-section on a weekend, unfortunately. So my wonderful doctors, I know we're kind of skipping ahead in the story to my next pregnancy, but my wonderful doctors arranged for me to go into the hospital that Saturday and Sunday. My C-section was scheduled on a Monday, so that I could be monitored, because I could not go. At that point, I was literally going to the doctor every day. Like the prior week, I was at the doctor's office Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Wow. And I was not about to go Saturday, Sunday and not see the baby and then deliver on Monday.
Right.
So they were kind enough to set it up for me to go into labor and delivery on Saturday and Sunday and have an ultrasound done. Went on Saturday. Was good, was able to leave, felt good about it. Went in on Sunday for my ultrasound, and everything was fine. It was just Tate was taking a little longer to pass the ultrasound. Like I told you, it's one of those ultrasounds where you have to the baby has to do certain things for them to kind of make you pass. And he was just taking a little longer, and it was just making me uncomfortable. And he eventually, nothing was wrong, but by that point I was like, guys, it was like 11 o'clock, I think, in the morning. I was supposed to be back at the hospital. My C-section was scheduled at like 7:15 in the morning. They make you get there 2 hours before. So I was going to have to be there at 5 a.m. I was like, guys, at this point, I'm going to be back in 18 hours. I was like, can I just stay? I was like, I'm kind of uncomfortable now that the ultrasound took a little longer. At that point, I told all the nurse, I'm very open about what happened to me. I mean, I will like shake your hand and be like, hi, I'm Sarah, and I had a 38-week stillbirth.
Yeah. Yeah.
I am very open about
You're
it.
like royalty at this point.
Yeah, I know. I'm like, yeah.
They're like, oh my God, so what can I do for you?
I was very open with all the nurses that what had happened. So they all knew. And I was like, guys, can I just stay? I was like, please. I was like, I would just feel a lot better if I could just stay on this monitor and just hear a sweet heartbeat for the next 18 hours. And the doctor came in and she was like, absolutely. She was like, that makes perfect sense to me. She was like, after what you've been through, I totally understand. You know, we can have the baby, if you can be hooked up the monitor the whole time. And if anything starts looking fishy, like we will wheel you into that C-section in minutes.
Love it. More doctors like that, please.
I know. And so I was like, done. Cool. So I sat there for the next 18 hours. I watched Criminal Minds. Not sure if that's the
You're
best.
Twisted, man.
I don't know. I don't know.
Let me watch maybe something even worse than what's happening to me happen on the TV.
Right. I was like, it was that, and I continued binge watching Criminal Minds during my maternity leave with Tate. I don't know what that says about me as a person, but it's maybe just because the trauma we've been through. I needed something to make myself maybe feel just a little bit better. Anyway,
I see it. I get it.
So I sat there for 18 hours and just listened to his heartbeat, and it was just what I needed. That was the first time in my pregnancy with Tate that I truly felt like I think this might happen. Like, I think we actually might bring home this baby boy. Like,
because you were advocating for yourself, you didn't take no for an answer,
yes.
And that's the message I want everyone to understand. When sometimes you feel like the doctors are in control and they tell you what to do. Sometimes you don't know what to do.
Yep.
But you have to listen to your body, your intuition, and you have to start trusting it again. Because after you have a stillborn, I thought I knew my body. I was like, my body will tell me what to do, you know, and Brody will come when he's ready. And my body failed me at that, you know, and I don't know what happened to him. So you have to get your trust back with your body, and you have to make sure that you advocate for yourself. And maybe even if you're wrong, maybe you're like, he's probably totally fine, but I'm going in there and I'm going to make sure he's out by 37 and you didn't shut up about it. And that's sometimes what needs to happen.
I feel like I've learned, not that I hate saying things like the positive in the situation, because there's no fucking positive in this situation. It's shitty.
Pretty shitty.
Our babies died and they're not here, and there's nothing that can be spun positive about any of that. But because I just am a naturally positive person, I do try to think of things that, okay, how did I at least grow from this? And one of the things is that I have learned to kind of speak up more for myself, because I am usually not like that at all. I'm not the squeaky wheel gets the oil. I am the I will just be a squeaky wheel and just be squeaky because I don't want to cause a commotion. I mean, people, I'll ask someone something and they'll say no and I'll be like, okay, well, thanks, bye, and just let that be. But I was not like that with my pregnancy with Tate. I mean, I pushed back, and I was not going to take no for an answer. I mean, that wasn't going to be good for me. So I learned to kind of speak up for myself, which is nice. I also feel like that was in a weird way, a really kind of spiritual experience, because it was I'm a control freak and I'm a planner, and I've got to know that things that are happening. I mean, I didn't even want to be surprised with my engagement. I needed to know, when are we doing this? What kind of ring what does it look like? I'm a planner. No surprises. So to be fully, this was one of the first times that I truly had to just be out of let all control go. I was not in control of this situation. And as much, and I could not to say that I was just going to sit back and be like, well, God, you got this. I mean, I still advocated for myself. I still made sure to go to all the appointments. I still did the kick counts. But at the end of the day, in the times when I got really anxious, I had to just pray, and I just had to say, I'm not in control here. I'm not in control here. And I had a list of 5 scriptures on my phone that I would just, when I was worrying, that I would just pull up and just read and remind myself, because it's just,
you didn't lose your faith, huh?
I couldn't, because that was the one thing that I felt like I could cling to give myself even a little bit of peace. And I will say, I had so much peace during my pregnancy with Tate, so much peace, a weird amount of peace. I'll even look back. So before I got pregnant with Tate, I was very anxious, obviously. I mean, I to the point where I felt like I was going to just be a emotional wreck the whole pregnancy. I mean, I pictured myself just sitting in a corner in the fetal position, being freaked out by anything, that seemed off. I was not sure how I was going to make it through 7.5 months. Yes, I calculated exactly 7.5 months from the time I was going to find out that I was pregnant to the time I was going to deliver was exactly going to be 7.5 months. I was like, okay, I just have to make it 7.5 months. But I wasn't sure how I was going to do that. And I'll say, when I got pregnant, I really did have this weird peace about it. Even now that he's here, I'll look back, and even seeing another pregnant person, or thinking about when someone tells me they're pregnant or whatever, I get very anxious for them, and I'm anxious for myself again. And I look back and I'm like, oh my God, how
did you do that?
How did I do that?
Oh my gosh.
How did I do that? Because I'm even anxious for you, and I'm anxious for, and I'm getting anxious. The thought of me even being pregnant again, I'm so anxious. And I just know that a shadow of a doubt, I only was able to do that because of my faith and praying about it and having peace, because I don't think I could have done it otherwise.
Oh my gosh.
That, and obviously coupled with all the appointments and having a wonderful doctor. Know if I'm allowed to shout out people, but my doctor, Dr. Jewel, love him.
He's becoming famous. He's the next Rainbow Clinic.
Oh
here.
my God. He is an angel on earth. I mean, so I switched OBs from my last pregnancy, or from my pregnancy with Brody, and not necessarily because I felt like they did anything wrong. They were just a bigger practice, and I felt like I needed a little more individualized care. That practice was just so large. It was hard to see the same doctor every time. It was hard to even see a doctor. Sometimes you just had to see a midwife. And I needed someone that was going to remember my name, was going to remember my story.
Again, you knew what you needed and what you wanted. You advocated, you pushed, you did it.
Yeah. And the other thing I liked about Dr. Jewel at Haven OB is that he does all the ultrasounds himself. So it's not a tech that's doing it. Now, not that the techs I don't think are qualified, but it was nice that a doctor was doing all the ultrasounds, because I could ask him real-time questions about things, and he could answer me real time, and he knew what I was afraid of. He knew what my fears were. And so he was able to, he just knew how to handle me when he was doing
Yeah.
the ultrasound.
Yeah.
You know, he was sensitive about it. That's probably the word I'm looking for.
Yeah.
Whereas sometimes, obviously, you're not going to tell every single tech your story, but because he knew my story, every time we did an ultrasound, you know, he was quick to show me the heartbeat. He was quick to say everything looks good. He was quick to say, you know, this is normal. You see, he would even point stuff out to me and he'd say, you know, you see this right here? Okay, that's fine. That's what this is. You know, like he anticipated what I was going to ask and like went ahead and assured me that it was fine.
That's awesome.
I remember this one appointment I had with him. I think it was like 27, 28 weeks. And I'd had a rough night the night before because Tate was just being kind of slow and like not moving as much, which at 27 weeks isn't completely abnormal. But I was obviously just more freaked out and in tune to any movements. And I remember going in for the appointment the next day and telling Dr. Jewel, you know, yeah, so I was. And I was like, I'm just so anxious. I said, you know, Tate took a while to move last night and I had a complete panic attack and I was up for like, you know, an hour and blah, blah, blah. And he stopped at the ultrasound and he looked at me in the eyes and he was like, I am so sorry that you're having to go through this. I mean, in that moment, I could just tell that he cared. He genuinely cared. I mean, he wasn't, he wasn't just being my doctor. I mean, he cared. I mean, you could just tell that he was just as invested as I was.
That's what we need.
Yeah.
I don't know. People don't realize it.
He was
different now.
He even, I wanted him to be the one to do the C-section, obviously, because he had been through this whole journey with me. So he doesn't normally schedule C-sections on Mondays, but he made an exception and scheduled it for me. He came in early at 7:15 to do my C-section before, and then he left. It was funny. I guess, because this is back when distant learning was still kind of a thing. So he was doing one of his son's distant learning pod classes or something.
Yeah.
And so he was like, I gotta, as long as I'm home by 10 to do, you know, he had to do something for his son's class. But he made sure to come in and deliver Tate.
That's wonderful.
For me, because he knew I wanted it to be him. And then I remember him coming in the recovery room and giving me a hug and saying like, you know, we did it. You did it.
That's what we need.
Yes. He was an angel.
Yeah,
if you're in the Atlanta area, you're going to be going through a PAL, check out Dr. Jewel.
I know. Absolutely.
I still just like, my husband is a little like I would get excited about going to my appointments. And I think my husband was like, I mean, do I need to be worried? No,
let's get him on the show. I want to talk to him. I know Liz is going to him. So you're not going to believe this, but our hour's up.
Oh my gosh. I talked for that long.
Isn't it fun? No, it's fun. We're going to have several more. We're going to book another one right now. There's so much to talk about. But what I want to do is say, first of all, what do you want to leave with? What do you want lost moms to know leaving this conversation right now?
Oh gosh. Probably the one of the biggest things I feel like I try to tell moms early on is that the pain that you are feeling in those first few hours, days, weeks, months will not feel that bad forever. It won't. I promise you. I promise you'll smile again. You'll laugh again. You'll have happy memories again. I promise you, it won't always feel that dark and heavy. Your baby will always be with you. You're always going to have kind of that trauma and this story to tell, but there can be so much happy stuff ahead. I'm smiling thinking about both my living babies, but especially my rainbow baby, because he's brought so much more life just kind of back into our life again.
Yeah.
So you can have happy days. I guess that's probably my biggest takeaway.
And on the days that it's not happy, find a lost mom, reach out. Are you cool with some of them reaching out to you?
Oh my gosh, absolutely.
How can they find you?
That's one of my favorite things. Please, find me on Instagram, Sarah_Emmert. I'm sure
I'll put it. Yeah, I'll put it in the caption too.
Facebook. I truly love. That's one of my favorite things is just to connect with other lost moms. So
love it. Yeah. Thank you so much for doing this.
Thank
You're
you
the best.
for having me, Kat. Love you. Love our Brodies.
Our Brodies are very proud of us.
Our Brody boys.
Thanks, girl.
Thanks.
That's all for this episode of the At a Total Loss podcast. If you'd like to help other lost moms benefit from our stories, please share, rate, and comment wherever you are listening. Thank you for being the strong mama that you are. And remember, when things have you at a total loss, we're here to help you find the light in the darkness. Take care, lost moms.